The following is a special presentation of Tony Kurre Radio. Want the real story behind the sound bites and headlines? Let's find the facts. Remember, it's not a conspiracy theory if it's the truth. You are not paranoid or confused. You just need to know.
And welcome, everybody, to another edition of Everything You Need to Know. I'm Kip Keefer on TKR. Delighted to be with you this week. We're going to get right to the point because I had a kind of Perry Mason Columbo moment. And I know those are old school television shows. Perry Mason, of course, emanated from a bunch of novels written by Earl Stanley Gardner about this iconic defense attorney, later played on TV famously by Raymond Burr, who always had a client that looked hopelessly guilty and always at the end of the show came up with the nugget of information that turned everything around and proved his client's innocence and pointed the finger directly at the real murderer. And Columbo, of course, another great series starring Peter Falk, of a detective that was relentless in his pursuit. He would kind of decide exactly what he thought happened and would hound the suspect relentlessly in kind of a charming way, not being combative or really adversarial, but more just probing constantly until he found the niche that proved his case. That happened for me last week at the beginning of the Hunter Biden trial. I was going to say Hunter, and I combined that with beginning, so that's what that came out. Anyway, Hunter Biden, of course, accused of multiple crimes and a sweetheart deal that would have gotten him off the hook last summer was actually stopped in state. It was a federal court by a judge who said, this looks unprecedented in terms of anything I've ever seen, of basically this guy who's facing multiple tax evasion charges. And right now, the current trial is the purchase of a firearm. And the reason he got away with doing that was because he lied on his form to apply for gun ownership. You have to check the box that you are not a drug addict. And there is overwhelming evidence that Hunter Biden was in the absolute top of the cycle in terms of his massive drug addiction right at the time of the purchase of this firearm. That charge, again, that's a violation of federal law to lie on your application. I get that. But I don't think that the case is as revealing as the case against Hunter Biden specifically is as revealing as what it has really kind of uncovered in the Perry Mason moment in our society, in our current government, in Washington, D.C., which I've decided D.C. used to stand for District of Columbia. And I think now this case reveals it stands for definitely corrupt, because in the opening phase of the trial, and listen to these words carefully, federal prosecutors in their opening statement unwrapped a plastic package that contained and held up a MacBook computer, a laptop, held it up, showed it to the judge, showed it to the jury, showed it to the gallery. This is the Hunter Biden laptop computer. We've heard about it and heard about it and heard about it again for the last 4.5 years. And now it was publicly displayed for everybody to see for the first time. This is the laptop from hell, as it's been called by Miranda Devine, the writer for the New York Post, who's broken a lot of the story about this particular item. And the New York Post, of course, obtained excerpts and a lot of the hard drive data from the computer. And on that computer are just a seemingly endless series of pictures of Hunter Biden imbibing in his crack cocaine habit and regular cocaine, all kinds of illicit drugs, including a 12-day bender in Beverly Hills, where he pretty much chronicled his activities throughout, filming himself narcissistically, bragging about his drug abuse, talking about the great things that it does for him, taking him to the darkest recesses of his mind, where he can clearly analyze exactly who he is, et cetera, et cetera. So it proves the case that he was heavily a drug addict when he purchased the firearm. It turns out illegally, because that checks you off the box. If you check the box that you're not a drug addict and you are, and it's discovered and you have been able to buy a gun, that is a blatant violation. But again, that's secondary to what this really revealed. So you've got a federal prosecutor from the Department of Justice of the United States holding up this laptop, declaring it Hunter Biden's laptop. The first witness in the case we call, and I don't have the gentleman's name, I should have been prepared for that, but we call FBI Special Agent on Communications and Devices, and this FBI agent strolls to the stand and says, absolutely, positively, without a doubt, we have certified that this is indeed the untampered with Hunter Biden laptop. Because for the last 3.5 years, the Hunter Biden legal team has been trying to pull the wool over everybody's eyes that this laptop could have fallen into the hands of enemy agents who added a bunch of material and altered a bunch of the content and created fake images that were Russian disinformation. That has been completely now denied by the FBI, which followed the FBI right after the 2020 election in early 2021, saying, yes, we have verified that the laptop is legitimate. Now you had a federal prosecutor holding up the computer and a FBI agent certifying this computer is 100% legitimately Hunter Biden's, and all the material on it is Hunter Biden generated. So why is that astounding? Well, let's look back to the sequence of events. 2019, Hunter Biden stops by a computer repair store in Wilmington, Delaware. The proprietor of that store is a guy named, this irony kills me, his name is Mac Isaac. Mac for a computer repairman, pretty good name, since most of the items he's going to get are going to be Mac devices. So Mac Isaac gets the computer. Hunter Biden says he's having problems in some kind of technical area. And this guy said, okay, I can fix that. And he said, it's going to take me 2 weeks. That was in April 2019. These dates are important. The agreement that Hunter Biden signs is once the repairs are effected, he's only got 90 days to come pick that up because the guy's got time and money invested in fixing it. So obviously, the customer needs to come pick up and settle up and take his device. He fixed it in the 2-week period. He notified Hunter Biden it was ready. 90 days passed, 120 days passed. And finally, this guy utilized his agreement that Hunter Biden signed and said, okay, this is my property now. I own it. He never picked it up. And he began to look at some of the things that were on the computer and realized what a hot potato he had, because there were tons of different messages back and forth to the Hunter Biden foreign connections. You remember the Biden family business? They don't have a product. They don't have a service. They don't consult. They don't have any kind of legitimate business purpose. They don't have a central account where all the everything's settled up in terms of invoicing and billing. They'd set up 20 some odd shell companies that did nothing more than have a bank account to send a variety of checks from all around the world for the Biden family business. And the Biden family business is clearly access and influence over Joe Biden, who was a longtime senator and vice president for 8 years under Barack Obama. And of course, all this predates his presidency now. But commitments made, millions of dollars spent. You have to wonder what the impact even today is on Biden decisions that are supposedly made in the best interests of you and me, but are already bought and paid for by the Biden family business. But let me get back to the main gist of this. And of course, it is that by holding up that laptop, declaring it absolutely legitimate, the FBI has completely indicted itself for their behavior during the 2020 election. So the store owner, Mac Isaac, knows a lawyer and puts it in his court of, this is some explosive stuff. What should I do with this? And it ends up being distributed to a couple of key people in New York, including one of the attorneys for former Mayor Rudy Giuliani, who was, of course, a big figure in the Trump administration. And Giuliani, through his lawyer and his contacts, ends up giving that information, which was a copy of the hard drive of the computer, to the New York Post for their examination and see what they wanted to do with it. In the meantime, all of a sudden, one day in late 2019, the FBI shows up at this computer repair store, and demands they have a subpoena to confiscate the Hunter Biden computer. Now, where did that come from? Supposedly the excuse is, well, we were already investigating Hunter Biden for tax violations and this firearm violation, et cetera, et cetera. And if there's evidence on the computer, that was allegedly the reason that they confiscated it in November of 2019. They took it back to Washington, I guess. I keep seeing the scene from the end of the original Indiana Jones movie, Raiders of the Lost Ark, when Indiana does actually recover the Ark and bring it back, and then demands of the government, what's going on? How's this being studied? What's happening? And they said, we've got top men looking into it. And at the end of the movie, of course, the last thing you see is the crate with the Ark of the Covenant on a hand truck in this gigantic warehouse of tens of thousands of other crates and different artifacts being wheeled to be put away in some kind of deep, dark corner in the bowels of our bureaucracy of a government. So I'm picturing for the first years, allegedly, that's the excuse that top men were looking at this computer. But with Joe Biden being the nominee for the Democrats and the absolute antichrist in their view, Donald Trump running for re-election, which was going to cause unbelievable turmoil in Washington because Trump had planned in his second term to basically clean house. He had found some legal loopholes where he was going to be able to take some executive action and take away this lifelong exemption from any removal by government employees. They were in full-scale panic mode. The Washington bureaucracy, deeply corrupt Washington, D.C. Anyway, Trump had to go. So I guarantee you the FBI familiarized themselves immediately upon having that laptop of everything that was on there and everything that was going to be damaging going forward. And you know how the proof of that completely comes to pass? A year later, they keep a lid on this. They don't mention it. Nobody knows about this computer. It's not in the public realm until all of a sudden you start to get the word that the New York Post is going to run, because they had to go through all their legal hoops to make sure they weren't going to get barbecued. And you find out that the New York Post is getting ready to run content from the Hunter Biden laptop. This is a month before the election. Now, the alarm bells start ringing. They've got to stop this. They got to put a stop to it. And what they come up with is that insidious plot a member of the Biden campaign called a guy named Malloy, who had been the number 2 guy basically in the NSA, the National Security Administration, and said that they've got this laptop and Hunter Biden hadn't had possession of it in over a year. They're going to try to say that it's his. I need you to explain to everybody in the intelligence circles, CIA, NSA, anybody who's been involved. There's 4 or 5 different directors that you can find, but put together some kind of document that says this information that's getting ready to come out in the New York Post is likely Russian disinformation. Get that word out, make sure everybody has it, and have everybody sign this letter. And immediately upon getting that, and all of them signed it, former directors, Brennan and Gates and all these other people, when they got that letter, they immediately published that everywhere, saying that this Hunter Biden laptop is clearly a prime example of Russian disinformation trying to discredit candidate Joe Biden and his family. And the FBI, who had this computer for a year without saying anything, all of a sudden became very involved in getting the word out along with them that this is likely Russian disinformation, when they knew damn well, after having the computer for a year, and I'm sure analyzing it up and down, that wasn't the truth. And if there's any integrity in the premier law enforcement agency of our country, and some people say of the world, if they see that a bunch of people have signed a document that said this is likely disinformation, Russian disinformation, and they knew, that they absolutely knew at that point that it was not, that it was a legitimate, not picked up computer with actual incriminating information about the Russian and about the Chinese and about the Ukrainians and all of the different actors that the Bidens had extorted money from for influence to Joe Biden. The FBI, if they had a shred of integrity and were not involved in the deep state, in the swamp, in the shadow government that we've been talking about on this show for the last couple of years and other experts have talked about, if the FBI had any integrity as a law enforcement agency, they would have come up right away and said, no, we have the laptop and it is not Russian disinformation. But not only did they not say a word and did not do that, they're in the middle of all of this when FBI agents, and this is absolutely documented, were dispatched immediately to social media companies, to Google, to Facebook, to Twitter, and they went and had meetings weekly. FBI agents met with these agencies weekly to tell them, you're going to get a flood of disinformation, and anybody who comments on it needs to be censored. This is not true. This is a Russian attempt to control our election. Trump had just hammered Russia. Why Russia would be trying to prevent the election of Joe Biden, the ultimate wimp in the White House that they could take advantage of, it just defies all explanation. So anyway, the FBI became very involved in pushing the fantasy that this wasn't legitimate information, thereby completely and without a shadow of doubt proving that there is an underlying bunch that is working feverishly behind the scenes to prevent you, the American people, from having your voices be heard and for having leadership of the people, by the people, for the people that are chosen by the people suppressed. And it may not have been the determining factor in the 2020 election. There's a lot of other nefarious things that went on that we've documented on this show. But this is the absolute Perry Mason moment that the FBI is not only, and they're in the Department of Justice as well, they're the law enforcement branch of that. It is absolute proof that these people conspired with others to take down the Donald Trump presidency and insert their puppet government under the very poor example of a world leader in Joe Biden, who we see continue to disintegrate before our eyes. And the fact that they're running him again is an absolute insult to everybody in this country, and it's an absolute disgrace to the Biden family, who could care less about poor Joe Biden's mental decline and his physical struggles to try to even keep up a bare minimum schedule. This is the definitive proof that the fix is in Washington, and the entire House needs to be swept clean, and an election of Donald Trump as president can accomplish that. That's the show for today. That's what you absolutely needed to know. The fix was in, folks. The premier law enforcement agency in the country had the laptop and had all the information it needed. And when this hoax was perpetrated, did they step up and live up to their oath and their sacred responsibility as the premier law enforcement agency? No, they did not. The Trump appointed director, Christopher Wray, had his agency become complicit and active in trying to prove the myth that this computer wasn't real when they knew damn well it was. That's Need to Know for this week. We really appreciate, as always, all of you tuning in. I hope you will do your own reading and research on this topic, because it's absolutely astounding when you start to kind of unravel the fact that now the laptop is being held up and shown for evidence, and experts are saying it's legitimate. You know that having it for a year between 2019 and the 2020 election, the FBI never mentioned it, never certified it, and most importantly, did not deny the absolute BS report that was circulated by these 51 former intelligence major figures, saying this was likely Russian disinformation. Not only did they not disavow that, they perpetrated by meeting with companies and newspapers and media and urging them not to publish or even allow any comment that legitimized the Hunter Biden laptop when they knew it was 100% legitimate. Back next week with more. Thanks for tuning in. Kip Keefer signing off on this week's edition of Need to Know right here on TKR.
This has been a special presentation of Tony Kurre Radio.